Welcome to Dave Talks Ball on this November 7th, 2024 episode, folks. It's week 11. It's already week 11, folks. I think I talk about it once a month. It's amazing how fast we are so fired up in July, August, once SEC Media Day start, even before, if we're being honest, about the season getting here. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And it feels like just Labor Day weekend just creeps. It just feels like it just creeps getting up to Labor Day weekend. And then we blink. It's middle of October. We blink again. Shoot, we're starting November. Blink again, it's Thanksgiving week. We're talking playoffs now. But let's be honest, guys, we love November football, but you know what? October is for pretenders. November is for the contenders. They remember what you do in November. That's what Jimbo Fisher would always say as we got closer to the month in our staff meetings, in our team meetings. He would say to players, hey, they remember what you do in the games in November. It is true. We got Bama at LSU this week. We know all the big-time games, the big-time players, the big-time moments that have happened in this game, specifically in Baton Rouge. We're talking 2012 LSU, TJ Yeldon, AJ McCarron at the end. 2014, we don't talk about this one a lot. Blake Sims leading them down for a game-tying field goal, ultimately won in overtime, or the Brandon Green eligible pass to the tackle. What else we got? We got 16 Jalen Hurts and them, 18. That was Tua and them, a lower scoring game. 2020, the Devontae Smith catch. LSU in 2022, the walk-off. I mean, even going back to when I was in college, 2011, the game of the century. I mean, I remember that game being hyped up for 2 weeks before the bye week, folks. Like just cameras from New Orleans, from all over Louisiana nationally, just being on campus. Those are the games in November we remember. Georgia Ole Miss, not a traditional game we remember in November. But again, contenders in October. November is for contenders. It's a playoff game in Oxford this week for the Ole Miss Rebels. We found out today, Billy Napier, folks, will officially be back in 2025. I'm assuming it just said he was the head coach. I mean, now if they go off and lose to Florida State down the stretch, lose to Ole Miss, lose to Texas, stuff like that, I don't know. I don't know how a Florida State loss would go about that, but we'll talk about that in a minute. On3's Pete Nakos, business guy, transfer portal analyst over there on On3. He will discuss Billy Napier, Coaching Carousel, and transfer portal. Does a phenomenal job. Young buck. It has a lot of ears, has his ear to the ground, has a lot of sources about what's going on in the college football world and the Coaching Carousel, transfer portal. He'll join us at the bottom of the hour at 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern for you folks in the Eastern time zone. By the way, put in the comments, guys. Are you an Eastern time zone person, Central time zone person? What is the best time zone? This is really because I worked at Georgia. Now I'm in Atlanta. Second time living, or third, living in Miami. So third time living in the Eastern time zone. I think the best is Central. Let's just put it in there for the chat in there just to determine. But it is Thursday. You know what that means? Prediction Thursday. Prediction on all 6 SEC matchups. We don't have any. We don't have any non-conference matchups this week, guys. It's all conference. It's the nitty-gritty. We got college basketball. As again, I keep talking about November. The feast week's coming up, and I always say that's one of the best weeks in sports. If you're a college football, college basketball fan, you got rivalry week. You got the Maui Invitational. You got the Vegas tournament this week at Alabama-Houston, that week. Speaking of Houston, you got Houston-Auburn this weekend in college basketball. I'm hoping I can get to that a little bit here. Florida's playing Jacksonville right now in college basketball. Florida just tipping off the second half up 54-35. Look like Will Richard. Yeah, look on the TV here. Over here. They just got it in a dunk. Then it's money-making weekend. I'll give you my best bets for week 11, folks. But let's get right into it. Billy Napier will return to Florida in 2025, folks. Look, it hadn't been good in Gainesville under Billy Napier. He is 15-18 through 2 seasons and 3 quarters almost. No one can argue. The on-field results have not been there. But with that being said, I think I'm a little bit in the minority here, and I don't overall hate this decision. I think it's a forward-thinking, big-picture, non-emotional decision. A lot of people are going to disagree with that, and that's fine. That's what makes sports great. That's what makes you tuning into this show great. We can agree to disagree. I'll hear you out. You hear me out as long as I feel like you're doing the proper research. And as long as you think I'm doing the proper research. Hold me accountable as well, folks. But I think with that being said, you could make a case for Billy Napier being fired, and I couldn't argue with you. But I would ask you, who with 100% certainty, I know this is tough to ask, who do you think you could hire that would actually be better than him? Potentially Lane Kiffin, if he would go? Again, I was one in the summer. I thought he would for sure go. I've talked to people closer to him now. I don't necessarily think that's the case. And if he goes at 9-3, would Scott Strickland in Florida even want him? Kurt Signetti in Indiana, we know he's undefeated. Listen, he told you, Google him, bro. He's won everywhere. It's a quote from Kurt Signetti himself. Do you think he 100% wins at Florida? I think he would, but I think there's some reserves there for sure. But back to why I don't hate this decision by Scott Strickland and the administration. Look, Scott Strickland will be very lucky to be able to make his third football hire his third football coach at the University of Florida. Most athletics directors only get 2 football hires. He's already had Dan Mullen, who he brought over with him from Mississippi State. Then he obviously hired Billy Napier from Louisiana. I call him Louisiana Lafayette. Does he get a third one? I don't know. I feel like talking to people over there, a lot of people in the admin don't really put – if Billy Napier doesn't work out, they don't put the blame on him because I think that was more of a group decision more than just Scott Strickland himself. But the university, as far as I know, I looked up before the show, they don't have an active president. It's an interim president, so I don't know if they were going to go make that move right now. I don't think they're as low on Scott Strickland as some are. But in this era to quickly fire people, I'm looking at you, Auburn. I don't hate that you're giving your guy that you say you believe in his 4th year. Also, factor in revenue sharing, the $20 million revenue sharing that is coming down the pipe, I think, within the next calendar year. I think that's going to have a big impact, too, because, I mean, you also would owe him a $27 million buyout. So it's a lot to think about. But wouldn't you like to be able just to go back to the revenue sharing thing, from talking to people, high up compliance people with head of compliances that I've been talking to that have been my neighbors before at school I worked at, now at high-end SEC schools. I just talking to them about that. Wouldn't you like to just kind of navigate the lay of the land of this new environment before probably making, let's call a spade here. If Billy Napier doesn't work out this year and doesn't work out next year after 2025, it's probably the most important University of Florida football coaching hiring search in this century, in the 21st century, since the year 2000. Really, since you probably hired Urban Meyer. I mean, this is that important. I mean, since then, you've had who? Will Muschamp, Jim McElwain, Dan Mullen, and now Billy Napier. People want to see that Florida's serious about football. So this would be a massive hire. And I think if you could have a little bit of, hey, this is what we're thinking that revenue sharing with $20 million is going to look like. Obviously, we give Billy another year. The younger players on the team that he's brought in are the better players. The guys like DJ Lagway, just throwing familiar names out there. I think you give him an opportunity to kind of go prove it. Like I mentioned, his buyout, $27.1 million. Per his contract, he would be owed 50% of his buyout within 30 days of this fire. So again, it's a lot of money with the remaining of the 50% paid out in 12.5% increments in the scheduled payments on July 15th, 2025 through July 15th of 2028. I honestly think it's a very mature financial decision. I don't know if I felt that way when I first initially saw this today, but like just peeling it back, letting it marinate, I don't hate it because I don't know who you can go get that is 100% going to be better than Billy Napier just in year 4. And then also, look what's coming down the chute, an ecosystem we've never seen in college football before. I don't want to be bringing in a new coach and the whole revenue sharing and learning kind of on the job with that because no one's really going to have those answers that first year. I kind of want to have a little bit of a lay of the land, have some familiarity. I mean, also add in, I think the players, they're never in trouble. You don't really see them a lot getting in trouble like you'd see Georgia players. I think if that was going on, they had a culture problem. They didn't like Billy Napier. I think, yeah, he's probably fired this year. People are like, well, it only matters what happens on the field. 100%. This is, as Jimbo Fisher used to say, I'm quoting him again, it's a scoreboard business. I mean, he used to say when there wasn't enough dishes cleaned in the cafeteria by the cleaning staff, he'd always make, man, if we tied their ass to the scoreboard, I bet they would go clean up that cafeteria where it wasn't dumpy when we brought in recruits. If you tied their ass to that scoreboard, I think they would have a little more fire under their butt. I think he would get mad about that. It's a scoreboard business. I always remember that from him saying that. It's a scoreboard business. But at the same time, I think if you have good kids in the program, they believe in what you're doing, they haven't quit on you, I think that goes a long way in separating, hey, should we give him one more year or not? Maybe not big picture, but I think just splitting hairs over a year. But like I mentioned, if they were turds within the program, for sure. But look, we have to get the Florida standard back. And I don't like this, too, though. Like, man, they're really playing hard for him. They only lost to Georgia by 14 with their third-string quarterback. I mean, they took Tennessee into overtime. I'm looking at the games to open up the year, and I understand Miami is good this year. They're the ACC favorite. They're undefeated. But in year 3, Miami should not be coming into your house and just totally dismantling you. Texas A&M shouldn't come out in Marcel Reed's first start and run all over you and pass, 6 times and beat you, and you're kind of a no-show once again in the swamp. That shouldn't happen. Those are the games. I get it. You're playing hard against Tennessee. Hey, I get it. You put up a fight against Georgia with your third-string quarterback. What would have happened with DJ Lagway? I get that, but those are the games that kind of circle back to me. So 2 things can be true at once. I really do believe that. Let's see what the ecosystem of college football is in a year. I think that's something to keep in mind of. And if you really believe in Billy Napier, he should get 4 years. And your better players are the players he's brought in. So I think it's a level-headed, mature decision, honestly. But I think at the same time, I get the frustration of people saying, hey, is Florida football serious? Because I'm old enough, a lot of you listeners, a lot of you viewers, and for the people who aren't, the Gen Zs, the young guys, welcome to the show. But Florida used to be something, guys. They used to be a power in college. That orange helmet used to mean something. That gator patch with the gator head on that left sleeve right there, it used to mean something when Steve Spurrier was there when I was a kid growing up in the 90s. They were the program. Then Ron Zook wasn't even that bad. But compared to Steve Spurrier, he wasn't great. Then you bring in Urban Meyer, who, we've seen all that. won 2 national championships. But at that point, it feels like Florida is just kind of going through the motions of what Tennessee was doing a little bit after they let go of Phillip Fulmer. Kind of feels like they're in that mode. They're just a little bit behind Tennessee. Josh Heupel's gotten Tennessee out of that stage. Feels like Florida's just meddling in that right now, and they really don't know what they want to be. But like I said, 2 things can be true at once. Billy Napier is underachieved. Florida fans, you can be pissed off as hell. This is about to be his 3rd straight losing season and 4th straight losing season in general for Florida if you go back to Billy Napier's days. It's wild. I never thought in my lifetime you would have Florida and Auburn going 4 straight years in those same 4 calendar years with losing records. But I think at the same time, you can also say with so much unknown in the sport, a new ecosystem coming down the chute right now, just 1 more year I do not think would be terrible. And you'll have more answers to go out and get your new coach. My only question is, what is the win total that would get Billy Napier back for 2026? It looks like he's coming back for 2025. I would be saying, let me put a caveat to this. If he were to lose to Florida State, what does that look like? Let's be honest. What does that look like? And you finish, 4-8? Like, what does that look like? Or the board of trustees going to make look? You read, look, I'm sharing it right now. Let me share it on the screen. Look, nowhere in here just says, Gator Nation, I want to let you know Billy Napier will continue as head coach of the Florida Gators. Like for the rest of this week or through the 2024. I'm assuming 2024. But again, I think it brings up, what if they did lose to Florida State in the year and he finished 4-8? I don't know if everybody's real fired up. I get it. I guarantee you they did this for recruiting. I don't know if Billy Napier went up to him and said, hey, we got a 51, whatever the ranking is of the high school class. Like, hey, we have prospects, potential transfer portal guys asking us what's going on here. I kind of need help. I guarantee you this was discussed. This is why he put this out. And I'm sure Scott Strickland, because, again, outside of Todd Golden, and he's made 1 NCAA tournament as the basketball coach and missed it the first year, there hadn't been a lot of great hires. Kevin O'Sullivan's not his baseball hire. He's been there forever, and he's hired 2 football coaches that hadn't worked out. But, you see this pretty vague statement, but he's coming back. It just doesn't really say when. I'd be interested there. But, again, in the win total in 2025, you essentially have the same schedule. They go at Miami, and you flip the home and away as the SEC schedules, those 8 games. So you already know kind of the schedule. What is the win total? I'd love to see it in the comments. What's the win total you think would get him back in 2026? Is it 9? It can't just be 6-6, 7-5 in year 4. It's got to be something of significant improvement. I think if you were to get to 5-7 this year and go win 9 next year, he's back. I think the number's 9. I've heard some people say 10. 10's not happening, guys. That's unrealistic. If that's your expectation, 10 wins in 2025, you should have just fired him this year. But again, I think 2 things can be true at once. The on-field product is not acceptable at all. You shouldn't have 3 straight losing seasons, 4 in total, if you go back to Dan Mullen, like I mentioned, at the University of Florida. But I do think the timing of this makes sense. Give him 4 years. You've changed strength and conditioning coaches. This was his first year. You can't do a lot, folks, in 1 year as a strength and conditioning coach. I'm just letting you know. Let's see if that transitions. I also think maybe you take some of that buyout money you're thinking, give him 10 to 12 extra $1 million. Let's go get some players out of the portal. If you're going to do this, give him all the resources he needs. If it doesn't work out, move on. And I do think that the revenue sharing is going to be coming down the chute. So I think you're going to have more answers to the test for potentially your biggest football hire in this century if Billy Napier were to not work out. Or you never know. He wins 8, 9 next year. You keep him and maybe you're going. But like I said, the hot seat usually keeps up to you, folks. There's only one coach, and maybe one you could argue is another. It's Jim Harbaugh, got off the hot seat, rode off in the sunset, and somewhat Dabo. Dabo was on the hot seat, definitely was winning big for that 5-year span. Now he's a little bit back on the hot seat, I guess, but like I was always told, the hot seat always catches up. Few truths in life: death, taxes, and the hot seat getting you, dude. It ultimately catches up to you. Again, I think Jim Harbaugh is the only guy definitively I can say survived a true hot seat. On to the gray. Appreciate you listening again, brother. Boomer Sooner. What was some of your favorite memories being on the college football staff? Most of us never really made it past high school ball. So to spend 9 years in the trade, you got to have some stories. Again, I didn't play. Yeah, I played at the high school level too. So what is it anything that, I didn't obviously play at any college level, but I got to start off at the University of Alabama. Worked at Miami right after that as my first job out. Was at Southern Miss briefly before going to Miami is in graduate school. Then went to the University of Georgia, Auburn, Texas A&M, Kansas, then UCF. Then that. Some of the stories you couldn't tell. I'll say this: most of the personalities in the SEC from working with them, because the SEC, I always tell people this: the SEC is so covered. It's so covered, as you guys know. That, like, you get to know these guys, you feel like, because they're doing so many interviews, SEC media is. Most of these guys' personalities are what you think they would be. Working with Gus Malzahn, paranoid, always thinking somebody's going behind his back. I remember I got to Auburn after they played the year at the Birmingham Bowl, and I think they got their bowl gifts, like these little, these little drone types things before drones were big. And people were talking about, man, if we could just put like an Alabama sticker, the GAs on the drone, and fly it outside his office window, he'd go nuts. It'd be like Russian propaganda. He thinks there's a spy. So again, very paranoid guy. He wouldn't let GA. We had a GA who played at Georgia, was a GA at Auburn. He wouldn't let him out to practice that whole week when they played Georgia. Wouldn't let him out. The head video guy who was over the film, he graduated from Tennessee. He wouldn't let him go to the game when we went to Tennessee that year. Very paranoid guy. Mark Rick was a great guy. Kirby Smart, very intense. I remember my first meeting with him. He straight up said it was the day after they played. He met with everyone in the recruiting department one-on-one. Only coach to ever do that I've worked with. And I remember him saying in that meeting, this was after they beat Clemson in the national championship in 2015. He got on the plane and immediately came to Athens. We probably met with him one-on-one a couple of days later. But I remember him saying, he was like, I'm still pissed off we gave up so much. Remember, they gave up a lot of points to Deshaun Watson in that national championship game. I mean, what was it? I'm looking it up now. Clemson versus Alabama in 2004. What was the final in that game? Yeah. 150 football playoff. What was the final in that game? I'm looking it up now. 45-40. Yeah. That 2015 Bama defense gave up 45 points. Like you could tell it bothered him in that meeting. Like he was still fuming. Like, and he was already the head coach at his alma mater at Georgia at this point. Just shows you the kind of competitor he is. I mean, other stories just dealing with kids and their parents because they're all so different personalities. I mean, when you're over a recruiting department too, you're dealing with 11 personalities, the head coach and the 10 full-time assistants. So you're just dealing with personalities. I think fans would be interested from the real behind the scenes of probably not as much homework gets done on hiring candidates, going through prospects as these fans would probably like to believe. But I do think a lot of these coaches at these big schools like in the SEC, who you think they are from a personality standpoint is probably who they are because they're so full. Like Les Miles, exactly who you would think he'd be. Kind of goofy, comes out of nowhere and is sharp as a tack at times, but kind of goofy, like your old grandpa, uncle. It's who he is. Nick Saban, very serious, doesn't talk to anybody in the hallway. That's who these guys are. Who you perceive them to be because they're so monitored at these big schools because we're fanatics, college football fanatics. You follow these people. I mean, again, in some of these states, these guys are bigger than the governors. So that's what it is. But I think it's a great question, On the Gray. I appreciate you asking. And if anybody else has any questions about that, I don't really have any issues answer that. Let's quickly get to some SEC basketball. Again, right now, we have the only Han Solo game tonight. 61-44 right now, Florida over Jacksonville. Florida got the win the other night against South Florida in the city of Jacksonville, actually. And then we get into a little Saturday action. Really wild here. We got some really good games. First, Tennessee, Louisville, right off the bat for you on Saturday afternoon. I know it's a big day for the SEC. We got SEC football, Ole Miss, Georgia, the big ones, LSU, Bama, obviously. But on the ACC network at noon Eastern, number 12, Tennessee at Louisville. Louisville breaking in a new basketball coach coming over from Charleston. It should be it should be a really good game where they shot a lot of threes, Pat Kelsey and the boys. But projected right now, Kim Palm has Tennessee winning this 76-75, 1-point game right now. 54% chance of winning for Tennessee. Where does the offense come from? That's something to keep monitoring Tennessee early, because if it's just going through Zakai Ziegler, I have big question marks. I think this team could get off to a little bit of a slow start, but as we all know, Rick Barnes is a Hall of Famer, one of the best coaches in the sport. He'll have them right by conference play. Would not shock me if Tennessee finishes in the top 4. I had them finishing 6th preseason. Wouldn't shock me if they finish in the top 4. And the big one, though, Auburn and Houston at the Toyota Center. That is at 8:30 Eastern on ESPNU. Right now, Auburn currently number 11, Houston 4. Auburn just dismantling Vermont, who's going to win their conference, probably being an NCAA tournament team, won by 52 at Neville Arena last night. Miles Kelly, the Georgia Tech transfer, shooting over 50% from the field. Jedi Broom doing Jedi Broom things. But Houston, physical team, Kelvin Sampson and the boys, that will be a fun game. I hate it's not on Sunday. I hate it. Outside of Auburn fans, and I'll have it on one of the TVs, but that's right in the middle of the Alabama LSU games. I don't think the viewership's going to be there like it should, or like it demands, or it should be. Like you said, this is a physical team. LJ Cryer's there now for Dewan Roberts. God, he's been there for years. But this is a physical basketball team, guys. Physical basketball team, one of the better ones. Alabama plays them in a couple weeks as well. Then we have, what's the other game we got here? Pulling up the schedule. Baylor at Arkansas in Dallas at American Airlines Arena. Oh, sorry. I need to tell you the Auburn one. All right, now Kim Palm. Going back to Auburn, Houston in Houston at the Toyota Center. Kim Palm has Auburn with a 41% chance of winning this. Has them losing at 74-72. This is one of the better non-conference games of the year. Auburn looked really good the other day. You're not going to shoot 50% from the field every night, but just their defensive intensity just overwhelmed Vermont. Auburn could have shot 15% from 3 last night and still won by 20+. Actually, they were suffocating defense last night. And then finally, Arkansas, Baylor at American Airlines Arena in Dallas. Right now, currently, Arkansas with a 49% chance to win this game, according to Kim Palm. He has the Bears. Baylor winning this game 77-76. That'll be a fun matchup. Scott Drew, John Calipari. Other games on the evening that night, you got Bucknell versus Kentucky. But overall, a good Saturday night in college basketball as well. You got the 2 night. 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPNU, Arkansas, Baylor in Dallas, and then right after on ESPNU, 8:30 Auburn, Houston. I'm fired up for that Auburn, Houston game, and Baylor, Arkansas. The morning game will be good too. Tennessee, Louisville. SEC is going to be strong, guys. Not a great opening night on Monday. Let's call a spade a spade. It wasn't. You had 4 losses. But I think yesterday you had a good dominant performance. Thought Arkansas on defense looked pretty good. Offense is going to be slow starting. A lot of new guys with Cal. So that'll be fun. Again, I'm your lead back college basketball analyst coming at you here from the SEC Unfiltered channel. We will keep bringing you that college basketball news as we continue to go. But let's get a quick preview in. One of the quick previews in. Remember, Pete Nakos is supposed to be joining us here at the bottom of the hour here at 9:30. But I'm going to sneak in a little preview here because we got 6 of them to get to. Let's get to it. Florida at Texas. Texas currently favored by 21.5 right now. Noon p.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone kick on ABC. Point total, 47.5 total. Setting the tone for you. We mentioned it. Billy Napier is officially back in 2025. But on Saturday, they'll probably be a little shorthanded. I saw DJ Lightweight listed as questionable. That's baffling because he got carted off the field. And it totally looked like it was like a torn hamstring off the bone. You don't really see a hamstring injury, somebody having to be carted off the field, which is wild. But Aiden Warner, third-string quarterback with Graham Mertz still being out, getting the starter. Graham Mertz is out for the rest of the year. That'll be interesting. But what Texas team do we get? Coming off a bye, offensive line needs improvement after the two previous games against Georgia and Vanderbilt, even giving up 4 sacks to Vanderbilt. That's something that needs to be worked out. Kelvin Banks then need to step up here. Quinn Ewers needs to have a game to start getting the stove hot as we start reaching the end of the year. He's someone I still believe in and could get it going because I've seen it. I saw it in Tuscaloosa last year, saw it in the Big 12 title game last year. I've seen him play well in big games. He has it in him. He just needs a stove hot kind of game to get that temp turned up. Feels like we hadn't seen Texas play in a long time. That Vanderbilt game, for whatever reason, feels like a long time. But what's going to happen? I can't imagine Florida scoring much in this game with a backup quarterback. I think that Texas defense is really good. They're top 3 in all major defensive categories: scoring, rushing, and passing defense. And that's just for SEC teams only. That's just 1 through 16. They are top 3 out of the 16 teams in scoring defense, rushing defense, and passing defense. It is what it is. That defense, Pete Kwiatkowski, PK, and them doing a really good job this year. Florida defensively, they're improved. They're improved. Ron Roberts, Austin Armstrong. And actually, they rank pretty high as well in defensive numbers and just conference games only. Just in conference games only. That Miami game really hurt them from statistically. They're improved. But the question is, can Texas with Trey Wisner, Jalen Blue, can they get the run game going? I think Texas for sure is going to win this game, but the margin will be determined by how this offensive line plays and if they can get the run game going. I really see no path to victory here with Aiden Warner playing this game. It's no offense to Aiden Warner. His parents are 2-time Florida grads. He went to Yale transfer. He's from Florida. This is an amazing moment for him to play a lot in the cocktail party against Georgia last week in this game against Texas. He'll never forget this. Florida's first game at Texas. Texas is going to win, though. But like I said, the margin will be determined how this offensive line plays and if they can get the run game going. 21.5 points is a lot, but I'm going to lay it. I'm going to lay it. You're going to see it on my money-making weekend picks. I'm not trying to ruin that. I'm just calling a spade here. But I think this game could be something like a 17-3, 17-7 halftime game. Texas kind of playing with their food, trying to figure it out off a bye week. And I think just Texas wears them down at some point. Probably wouldn't shock me if they had a big pick six or got a couple turnovers on short fields, obviously. But I think Texas ultimately runs away with this 34-7. But it wouldn't shock me if Texas is struggling a little bit in the first half still. Like I mentioned, 17-7, 17-3. But I think they ultimately pull away. Give me Texas 34-7. From a straight betting standpoint, I'm telling you, I would take Texas in this. I would lay the points. I'd take Texas in this one. We'll sneak another one in here. South Carolina at Vanderbilt. 4:15 p.m. Eastern on the SEC Network. South Carolina favored by 4.5 right now. Point total 45.5, setting the tone for you. This is an under-the-radar game nationally here. Both teams coming into this one as overachievers. Vandy, bowl eligible already with their win against Auburn last week. South Carolina will be if they can get this week. They're 5-3. They get their 6th win this week with a win. Both teams, still a lot of meat left on the bone for the 2024 season. Still a lot to play for. Carolina could get to 9 wins and potentially get into the playoffs with some true chaos. I don't think it happens, but it's not out of the realm. And any extra wins for Clark Lee and Vanderbilt is icing on the cake. I think Clark Lee should already be the national coach of the, or should be up for national coach of the year and for sure SEC player coach of the year. Thought Mike Elko would have a chance, but I'm going to give the edge here to his pupil, Clark Lee. But Vandy didn't play their best game offensively last week. Defense picked them up and got the win. That's why they've been playing the most complimentary football of anyone in the league from top to bottom this week. Diego Pavia looked like he was a little banged up. You hadn't really seen it reported, but I don't think he's 100% healthy here. At some point, I think Vanderbilt does run into this wall just due to depth. But Carolina got one of their biggest wins of the Shane Beamer era. It's up there with that Tennessee 2022 win, that Clemson 2022 win, that back-to-back weeks. Big win against A&M. But what's going to happen? I think South Carolina improving on offense, especially with Lenore Sellers. The offensive line played well last week, but Lenore Sellers just reminded me of something you wanted to see more out of Anthony Richardson. That's who you wanted to see, just breaking tackles, that lower body strength, just that power, just breaking down. I mean, he really wasn't sitting back there except the one corner route to Josh Simon in the end zone when it put up 14-0, I think, after going back and watching it. But just his ability to extend plays was massive. Rocket Sanders running through ball carriers. Again, A&M looked tired last week. They did. And South Carolina's facing the same challenge A&M came into their house with last week in Willie B. Coming off a big emotional win at home like A&M did against LSU. And go on the road against a team who's hungry like Vanderbilt and Diego Pavia. But they were just average last week. Give Auburn credit. Give DJ Durkin credit. They had a phenomenal game plan. That's why I picked Auburn last week. I thought the defensive game plan would be there because I think DJ Durkin's one of the more underrated coordinators in the sport. They have some young cats like Keldrick Fogg, Crawford on the back end. And again, as more tape gets out on Vanderbilt, that spread option, coaches, coordinators talk, I think it could slow them down a little bit. Again, one of the best complementary football teams in the country. But they are hitting a wall, I think, at some point. This will be a really tough test for them against one of the best defensive fronts in the country. Kyle Kennard, Tonka Hemingway, Boogie Huntley, true freshman Dylan Stewart. We talked about it. Our boy Pete Nakos, who's about to be on, reported him potentially getting the $1 million deal to stay from an NIL collective. It's a really good front. But if Vanderbilt is operating at a full 100% on offense, or I said if they can't, I have a hard time seeing them winning this football game. I'm actually pretty confident South Carolina wins this game. This would be one of my more shocking ones of the SEC. I think Shane Beamer and the boys are playing well. I wasn't high on South Carolina going into the year. I've stated that. Defense, I thought the front seven would be really good. Back end is better than I thought it would be. The offense a little all over the place, but Lenore Sellers is starting to come in his own, reminding me of what we all thought Anthony Richardson should have been. Give me South Carolina covering and winning by double digits, 28-17. I think that's the difference. Vanderbilt needs a bye week. They get it next week. I just think this defensive front is going to be key. But you got to play assignment sound football here. Give me Carolina 28-17. But let's bring in our boy. We told you, Pete Nakos coming in here. Pete, what's going on, brother?
What's going on, dude? How are you?
Good, man. I appreciate you joining us, brother. How's everything going tonight?
Good. Busy as can be, but all good.
Yeah, your phone's probably on fire all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's gonna keep getting warmer and warmer the next week.
Well, dude, I appreciate you joining us for 10, 15 minutes. Guys, remember, like I said at the beginning of the show, Pete Nakos, college sports business and transfer portal reporter from On3's Sports. Go give him the follow on Twitter at Pete Nakos. Pete, let's get right to it. You had an article 2 days ago that I thought was phenomenal, breaking down kind of what we could potentially expect from the portal coming up, some coaching hires. We got big news today. I'm going to ask you. Let's get right to it. Thoughts on the Florida news today?
Yeah, I think the Florida news, it was a measured move on Florida's part. You look at the situation down there, the administration maybe might not be as lined up as some other administrations across the country. The recent presidential departure and it's kind of a well-known fact at this point. Maybe not as much to the public, but I think Scott Strickland's future is tied a lot to Billy Napier, and I think that paying a $20.6 million buyout at this point in time with revenue sharing starting in, I don't know, 6 months or so, it just might not add up on paper. It also gives Scott Strickland some more time and Billy Napier some more time. And we're going to have to see how this shakes out. Do they go all in the transfer portal like they claim? I think that's going to be really fascinating on my end to see how that plays out. And do they give the NIL dollars that you would think they're going to need to be successful and put around the roster around DJ Lagway? That, in my opinion, today's announcement was kind of like, okay, we're going to go all in on DJ Lagway. So what do you need to do to put around him? Well, you're going to have to put some more talent in the wide receiver room. Got to make sure that line of scrimmage looks good. Make sure the running back room has some depth, like things like that. Like, and the only way, as you know, man, the only way you change that overnight is the transfer portal. So going to be a really interesting, 6-10 weeks to see how all that shakes out.
Pete, do you see any way, I mentioned it earlier in the show, and I feel like you would have a good pulse on this, because I'm reading Scott Strickland's initial sentence. It just said, I wanted to let you know Billy Napier will continue as the head football coach for the Florida Gators. Pretty broad, but I'm saying if they went 4-8 and lost to Florida State down the stretch, do you think this changes any of that at all? Or you're like, no, I think he's pretty locked in to 2025.
Yeah, so had some conversations today with some folks down there. I get the feeling that they're locked in for 2025. I'm also not going to be the one who comes out and says it's definitively like that, because you never know what can happen in the final weeks of the season if they need to walk things back. But everything I heard today, that is Billy Napier will be back for 2025.
Any other SEC jobs you think open up? Could we potentially see a Mark Stoops retirement? Obviously, Sam Pittman's in that conversation as well. I mean, it looks like they may get to 6 with a La Tech win. Obviously, a win over Texas would help. Maybe he retires. Any thoughts? You think we see do we see an SEC job opening up this year?
Yeah, so starting at Arkansas, everything I've been told from talking to quite a few people is that Sam Pittman will probably return next year. Now, obviously, like we just said with Billy Napier, anything can change. But if Sam Pittman reaches bowl eligibility, it's kind of hard to see him not back at Arkansas for another season. Kentucky, Mark Stoops has a heck of a buyout that's north of $40 million. So Kentucky's not going to make a move. Does Mark Stoops want to take a year off? I'm not sure. I don't think he's really put some thought into it yet, but that will obviously come as the season winds down. I've had Auburn circled as one to watch, but that's more so one to watch for the 2025 coaching carousel than this year. They've had a lot of success on the recruiting trail, but obviously the wins aren't really translating at the moment. Does that change with this 2025 class coming in next year? That's another buyout that's quite hefty. But the one thing to note there is that is a reduced buyout, and there is no lump sum, right? So Hugh Freeze would just be paid monthly over like the next 4 years.
Would you agree with this statement? Do you think the two hottest seats going into next year is Hugh Freeze and Brent Venables?
Yeah.
From this conference, from the SEC?
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree. And then, I think Sam Pittman's buyout will only get less and less the more he keeps coming back. So that's going to be one to watch too, is just, does Arkansas continue taking steps forward? What's that look like? So yeah. And then that Mark Stoops situation, like we just talked about, that's just going to be fascinating to watch play out. And maybe it doesn't play out, but even then it's what is Kentucky football?
A couple more questions, Pete. I appreciate you joining us again, guys. Pete Nakos, college sports business transfer portal reporter for On3's Sports. If you follow college football at all, I feel like if you have a Twitter, you should know who Pete Nakos is. But go give him the follow if you're not already at Pete Nakos. Pete, speaking of Oklahoma, I asked you, OC job. You mentioned some names in your article. Joe Craddock from Tulane, Arizona State's Marcus Arroyo, UNLV's Brennan Marion, Washington State's Ben Arbuckle, and Georgia Tech's Buster Faulkner's emerges some names. What are you kind of hearing for the Sooner fans? We actually have a pretty good Sooner base listed to this. What's the thought so far on the Oklahoma opening, the OC opening job right now?
Yeah, so as we just mentioned, right, Brent Venables at this rate is going to be on the hot seat going into 2025. So that offense coordinator search, from everything I've been told, has really not ramped up yet, right? He's kind of coaching for his job right now, trying to make sure they reach a bowl game if they can. Right, I think if he finishes 5-7, that's going to leave a lot of questions going into next year. So the OC job search has not really been, it's starting to get going at best. Beyond that, too, the coordinator pool is going to be significantly impacted by Brent Venables' job security, right? Like someone like Andy Koldnicki at Penn State has had a really good breakout season. And I know OU fans have been like, oh, that'd be great to have him. Well, he has a better situation right now at Penn State. So why would he leave if he's closer to getting a head coaching job right now at Penn State? Mike Shanahan, the Indiana OC, has come up a little bit. I think he kind of wants to wait to evaluate this entire, coaching landscape, right? There could be some more OC movement across the country. Is Oklahoma like his number one pick? So things like that. It is. I mean, I wrote about it, about it, everyone's talked about it, but this hire is going to be critical to Brent Venables' future at Oklahoma. And the pitch that he's going to give guys is, hey, I know that things aren't great right now. Maybe I'll let you bring in, that OC hire will get to bring in some staffers. I'm not sure about the whole breadth of that, but if someone goes in there and turns around that offense, right, this, they'll be the biggest coaching name on the market. So those are kind of like the pros and cons right now of trying to hire an offense coordinator right now at Oklahoma.
Pete, last question before we get you out of here. Transfer portal opens up December 9th through the 28th, the day after the college football playoffs are announced. I feel like we say it every year. You tell me from this is going to be the biggest transfer portal year that we ever seen. What's kind of your real vibes here? Like, you're like, yeah, I could see a lot more kids entering the portal than we're expecting this year, just due to trying to have that leverage to get paid more. What's kind of your feel out there from talking to people?
Yeah, I do think it's going to be crazy. Now, what level of crazy? I feel like we've never really set a good barometer when people talk about chaos to be like, this is what we think this would be the craziest one is. So, I think what will always stick with me is when the portal opened last year, right at like 6 a.m., Kyle McCord went in, and by 11 a.m., Dylan Gabriel was in. So I think that we'll have that kind of craziness. Now, in terms of like stunners, like that Jordan Addison going in the portal 2 years ago now, I don't know if we'll meet that, but the dollars keep flowing. Revenue sharing is coming. So more and more schools are making higher offers, whether they're true or not. That doesn't really seem to matter as I've seen it. It's still enough for guys to want to get in the portal and try to make a buck or two. And then beyond that too, with all the conference realignment that's happened in the last 18 months, right? With the SEC's changed, the Big Ten has officially changed. I think we'll see a lot of movement because of that as well. So, it's I think we'll get a better idea in the next few weeks, but everything I've heard is it should be pretty crazy.
Yeah, no, it's crazy times. That's why I wanted to bring you on early November, kind of get you on before the madness kind of starts, man. I know we got big games this week, big games over the next few weeks, but obviously that's going to be here before we know it. And I think we're not going to talk about it until it's on our heel or it's on our toes. So I wanted to bring you in, Pete. I appreciate you joining us, man. I know it's late Thursday night, but I appreciate you taking the time coming on, guys. Again, Pete Nakos coming over from On3's Sports. Go give him the follow if you aren't already. I'm sure most people already are. At Pete Nakos, if you want any business, transfer portal stuff, you're following in the college football world, some of the stuff off the field, but coaching hires, transfer portal stuff that matters and ultimately shapes rosters in college football in the future. Pete, I appreciate you joining us, brother.
Appreciate you. Have a great night, man.
Good night. Pete Nakos joining us, man. One of the up-and-comers, does a really good job. Has a lot of boots on the ground, his ears to the ground. He's always buzzing around, hitting, looking for those hives, man. Trying to find, get those little nuggets, get those little tidbits in college football, in the coaching carousel, and around the transfer portal. So I wanted to bring him on. But next, guys, let's go to it. We got two. We got through two. Let's go to one of the first big ones. Georgia at Ole Miss. Georgia favored by 2.5. Point total, 54.5. Let me move this real fast for you. 54.5 point total. Again, Ole Miss at Ole Miss, Georgia at Ole Miss, 3:30 p.m. Eastern on ABC. Georgia favored by 2.5. Point total, 54.5. Setting the tone for you folks. Last year, let's call it spade a spade. It was a blowout in Athens. 52-17, chilly, wet night. Lane Kiffin went to the portal. I don't have to tell you what happened if you follow college football. Openly stated he built this roster to go try to beat the Georgias and Alabamas of the world, and this game specifically stuck in his head, where they were just bullied around on both sides of the line of scrimmage last year. He mentioned this is what he built this team for. It's an elimination game for Ole Miss, folks. Lose, let's call it spade a spade. This season would have been a failure with you investing $12 to $14 million into this roster. I've heard different numbers. So that's why I just threw both out there. 9-3 contextually is a great year for Ole Miss. But when you factor in the schedule, essentially you'd have lost every big game you would have potentially had outside of South Carolina. Looks like a better win now. It's a failure. Let's call it spade a spade. This is going to determine if the 2024 season is a success or failure. If they win, you feel good about them beating Florida and beating Mississippi State to finish 10-2. You feel good about that. But we have to judge with context. For Georgia, you still have one get out of jail free card. You go lose this game, finish 10-2, beat Tennessee. You beat Tech. You beat UMass. You'll be in the playoffs at 10-2. But you can kind of hammer in your playoff spot this week. And things have been inconsistent all year. Now, again, it's all relative. We compare Georgia just like how we used to do with Alabama. We compare Georgia to Georgia. And we still do it with Alabama. But no one can deny this Georgia team, the way they've played so far, is not winning a championship of any kind. Can they improve? Yes. And specifically at the quarterback spot. Carson Beck has to be that guy that Georgia can rely on to go win them big games now, guys. I say it all the time now. You have to be able to score points. Your quarterback's got to be one of your better players on your roster. You can't just rely on your defense week in, week out. It's a good defense. We saw it against Texas a couple weeks ago. They can take over games. You can't rely on that with how good these offenses are and how spatial the game is now. If you're Georgia, you got to get one of these next two. Ole Miss, Tennessee, you'll be in the playoffs, and it starts Saturday afternoon at Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. What's going to happen? This one comes down to two things for me. Can Ole Miss run the football, and can Carson Beck just be solid, just be okay? As bad as Beck has been in the turnover department, Georgia has scored 30-plus points in the last 5 games. As bad as they have been with him turning the football over 11 times, they've still scored 30 points in 5 straight games. I mean, imagine if he was playing well. That's what's kind of scary. And that's why I think they have the highest upside of anybody in college football still. Again, Kirby says it's they have the least amount of depth he's had since his first year in 2016 at Georgia, and I believe that. But when comparing across the board, you tell me, folks, in the comments, I don't think there's a great college football team this year. I think there's a lot of good teams, no great teams. If you made me pick one, I pick Georgia right now to probably win it all if playing at hitting their ceiling. But I think Ole Miss's offensive line, it's improved personnel-wise. They brought in more bodies, some guys from Washington, brought a guy from Southern Miss, Diego Pounds from North Carolina. But I don't think it's as improved as much as they'd hoped due to some injuries as well. But Ole Miss will have to be able to run on Georgia to some extent. Henry Parrish is out. It's Ulysses Bentley's week. And I think Jackson Dart's going to have to be involved a little bit. Now, Georgia hadn't been great on the ground either. And what's the status of Trevor Etienne with the rib injuries? But I trust the Georgia offensive line more than I trust the Ole Miss offensive line, even with the running back injuries. I'm going to count on the Georgia defense to make big plays and win this game for them again. I'm not doubting Georgia again like I did hang into Athens. I like Ole Miss. I think they're one of the more underrated, forgotten teams in college football because they lost a game in Baton Rouge at night at LSU, a game they led the entire game until they lost in overtime. Kentucky's one they for sure would like back because Kentucky has not got off the bus since they left Oxford. They've lost 4 straight now. But what makes me think this Ole Miss offensive line just magically plays well this week? They haven't played great all year. It's a little better than last year, but again, I'm going to take Georgia. If it's the Georgia defensive front versus the Ole Miss offensive front, that has just stuck with me all week when predicting this game. I can't get it out of my head. I think Beck's going to be just solid enough. I do think he's going to have a turnover or two because that's kind of who he is at this point. And can Georgia get off to a little bit of a quicker start? But I do think at the end of the day, the Georgia defensive front is the biggest matchup in this game. Give me Georgia 30-24. I think Georgia covers 30-24. Before we move on, let's make sure I tell you that this episode is brought to you by Roback. Go to roback.com and use code SECU for 20% off your first purchase. Guys, it's starting to get a little bit cooler weather. I mean, not really here in Atlanta. I mean, it was in the 80s today on November 7th. I'm waiting for a little bit of that fall cool weather. I hadn't got it yet. But be prepared for when it does. Go to Roback. Got a lot of nice, cool university stuff. Feel good material out there. I'm sure you have some Roback stuff just like myself. But again, guys, go to roback.com. Use code SECU for 20% off your first purchase. Let's go to our next game. Mississippi State at Tennessee. Tennessee favored by 24.5. Point total 61.5. Games at 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. Setting the tone for you. Tennessee in a good spot to make the college football playoffs, I think. I feel about on a scale of 1 to 10 of confidence level of them getting into the playoffs, put it about a 7. They got Mississippi State this week, at Georgia, UTEP at home, and at Vandy. Mississippi State, once again, trying to go into the game, play respectable on the road like they have in Austin, like they have in Athens. In year 1 of Jeff Lebby, they're improving. I feel like I've seen a little chestnut checkers move. They're not just going out there and going through the motions. There looks like there's a game plan to keep games close, and that matters. But what's going to happen? I want to see Nico in the passing game get going, guys. For Tennessee to reach its ultimate goal and to be a championship contender, whether that's in the SEC or a national championship landscape, Nico and the receivers, the offensive line, have to get on the same page. Tennessee is by far the better team in this football game, and it ain't even close. Key word being Tennessee should win this game. And college football has been as unpredictable as it's ever been. So much parity in the sport now. But Tennessee leads the SEC in rushing, and State is dead last in rushing defense. Tennessee could run their way to victory here. And I'll say this. I think from a perspective of two, we know what Dylan Sampson can do. This is a game, too, you could potentially develop some of this depth that you may need. Because, again, Ashton Genty, the running back from Boise State, who's in the Heisman contingent. I think I looked at it. Dylan Sampson only has like 15 less carries than he's had this year, and they're trying to run him into a Heisman campaign. And Dylan Sampson may be a little bit of an underrated Heisman contender because he's the only thing that's been consistent for Tennessee on offense this year. But I'll say this, to win a championship, you have to level that out. You can't just keep loading him up with carries. Somebody like Deshaun Bishop, Peyton Lewis, Khalifa Keith, Cam Seldon, if he can help. Maybe this is a game because I think you can run against Mississippi State. You try to develop that number 2 more so than just giving Dylan Sampson 15 to 20 carries. Maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe that's just me thinking long-term, but that's just something to keep an eye on. Tennessee, like I said, could run their way to victory here, but the cohesion in the passing game is something that will determine if this is a championship team or not. We know this is a defense. This is a championship-worthy defense, especially in the front 7. And this may sound crazy to Tennessee fans because they aren't used to seeing it. I expect Tennessee to get in the 40s on Saturday night. A lot of that has to do with Mississippi State not being very good on defense. I think Tennessee wins big here, but if I'm a Tennessee fan, I'm not just looking at the scoreboard here. I want to see, hey, how did Nico look with the receivers? Or him and the receivers on the same page? Or him and the offensive line on the same page? And I want to see a little bit of that running back depth continue. Michael Van Buren was probably one of his tougher tests. Knoxville at night against probably this – at the time, probably the best defensive front he's faced. Going into that, I mean, remember, they put up 31 points in Athens now, Mississippi State. So they may tell you that's not the best front they've seen. Maybe this week. But give me Tennessee 49-10. I don't think this game's – Tennessee shouldn't lose this game. Again, college football is as unpredictable as it's been. But I think Tennessee could run their way to a victory here because it's so bad. I mean, like I said, I think Chase Scadaboo from where Arizona State in week 2 is still running. What do you have, 275 in the Mississippi State defense? And Coleman Hutzler. But again, it was a long time ago, but still, Tennessee gets the win here, folks. Moving on to the next game, Oklahoma at Missouri, setting the tone for you. This game is at 7:45 p.m. Eastern on the SEC Network. Oklahoma favored by 3, point total 41.5. Another under-the-radar game in the conference for different reasons. Winner can finish strong, feel some confidence rolling in to the late part of November. Biggest question, how healthy is Brady Cook? That's all we want to know. Had the ankle sprain against Auburn a couple weeks ago. Looked like he hit his hand against Alabama, and I think that's what ultimately knocked him out of that game. But Missouri's still a shot at 10-2. I don't think they'll get there with Brady Cook. Without Brady Cook, they definitely won't if they're just riding Drew Pine. But Oklahoma just needs to focus. I know Oklahoma fans are not going to want to hear this. And they said all offseason, hey, they're going to go win 8-9 games in the first year of the SEC. I didn't believe that because of the offensive line, the lack of continuity there, and in the schedule, the conference schedule just being so tough. I always thought it was tougher than Florida's conference schedule. Florida just got the preseason pub because they had Miami and UCF in the non-con. But I think just getting 6 to 7 wins here for Brent Venables in year 4 or year 3 wouldn't be bad. And a win here on Saturday, and Como starts it. And like, can Joe John Finley, who you mentioned, give me a story from college football. I worked with him at Texas A&M. Can him and Jackson Arnold come up with a good game plan that plays within Jackson Arnold's strengths to show some kind of promise towards the end of the year? They still got Alabama. They still got to go to Baton Rouge. They need this win if they want to get to 6. They need this in a very bad way, in my opinion, if you want to get to 6. You're sitting at 5-4. You have to win this game because beating Alabama at home, especially if Alabama beats LSU, well, either one of them, Bama or LSU's obviously got to win. Someone's got to lose. The winner of that game is probably not losing to Oklahoma. LSU's probably not losing to that to lose a playoff opportunity at home. Bama's probably may not play well, but they're probably not going to lose that game. So I think this is your chance. It's your chance to get to bowl eligible. 6 wins isn't what the Oklahoma standard is, but it would be something to hang your hat on when you factor in the injuries, 5 out of 7 receivers being out most of the year, the lack of continuity, firing your OC. For Missouri, like I said, 10-2 still on, but what is the game plan that is going to be designed with Drew Pine? Brings me to what's going to happen. If Drew Pine is starting the whole game, I would be surprised if Missouri won this game. I'll be honest with you. Myself, Cole Thompson, did this preview on the SEC Unfiltered channel. Go check out the preview on YouTube. We both kind of said that. We both took Oklahoma, not spoiling it for you. It's just, how do I expect a lot of positive movement from that offense against a pretty good Oklahoma defense? The key to this game, outside of Brady Cook's health, obviously, is what can Oklahoma generate against a pretty solid Missouri defense? That is what concerns me because I don't think Brady Cook is going to play. And I'll tell you this, a little tidbit. Eli Drinkwitz and Shane Beamer can't stand each other. You don't think Eli Drinkwitz would maybe sit him out knowing, hey, first game against a really tough Oklahoma game. And South Carolina is going to be tough too. But remember, Drink's never lost to South Carolina and Shane Beamer. It wouldn't shock me if he's like, I think we got a better chance to go win that game if we can give Brady another week. I don't know any of that. Just I know those two do not like each other, especially Eli Drinkwitz doesn't like Shane Beamer. But with that being said, I think if you're patient, you can run on this Missouri front 7 if you're Oklahoma. They're 12th in rushing defense in the SEC, giving up 134 yards per game, this Missouri defense. Oklahoma ain't great on the ground either offensively. They're only 11th in rushing offense for 145 yards per game. But sometimes you just need a get-right game like they had against Maine last week, where Javonte Barnes went over 200 yards. So crap. Wi-Fi went out for a minute, folks. I don't know how long I was going, but I'm just going to tell you what's going to happen. Go back and redo the Oklahoma, what's going to happen. If Drew Pine is starting this game, I would be shocked if Missouri won. It gets a really good offense, a pretty good Oklahoma defense. The key to this game outside of Brady Cook's health is what can Oklahoma generate against a pretty solid Missouri defense. But I think if you're patient, you can run against this Missouri defense, I think. But you got to be patient. I mean, they're 12th in rushing in conference out of 16, 12th out of 16 in rushing defense. They're giving up 134 yards on the ground. Oklahoma, though, isn't great because of all the inconsistency on offense. But, I mean, they're only 11th. They're only rushing for 149 yards a game. But sometimes a game right like Maine against the fighting Stephen Kings. I say that because that's where Stephen King went. You know what I'm talking about. Javonte Barnes went for over 200 yards last week. Maybe they figured something out. But just a gut feeling, I think Oklahoma goes for over 100 on the ground. I don't think they're just going to go up and down the field on Missouri, but I think they'll be good enough to factor in Jackson Arnold in the run game to two Jacksons in the league. Killing me. Jackson Arnold, I thought he did a good job against Oklahoma picking up yards on the ground last week when he had to. I thought he did a phenomenal job. Not 2 weeks ago. Like when it was in front of him, he went and just picked up 4 yards. Again, guys, there's nothing wrong with 2nd and 6. I think quarterbacks now, guys like Jalen Milroe struggle with that. And that's what would frustrate me if I was Kalen DeBoer and Nick Sheridan, not talking about Alabama in the Oklahoma-Missouri preview. Just staying ahead of the chains, folks, is massive. And I think quarterbacks forget that at the time. I just think if the run game gets going, I think Jackson Arnold gets comfortable because Missouri's going to bring more guys into the box. I think it's going to open up bigger throwing windows. I think Oklahoma plays well. And if it's a Drew Pine game for Missouri, give me Oklahoma 20-7. If Brady Cook can go and he's about 60-70%, which I think he would be going if it was that. I don't think Brady Cook's going to play. Even if he does, give me Oklahoma in a closer game, 20-17. If he does it, give me Oklahoma 20-7. Getting to bowl eligible. Again, folks, not what Oklahoma fans want to hear, just getting to bowl eligibility. But when you factor in context, again, things aren't black and white in life, guys. It's usually in the middle. 2 things can be true at once. Did they underachieve this year? Yes. But getting to 6-7 wins with all the injuries you've had on offense, firing your offensive coordinator mid-year, you kind of take it and just go regroup and try to go hire, like we talk to Pete Nakos. Who could they go hire as that OC? I do think it may be a little harder to get potentially in a must-have year for Brent Venables because I'm on record as saying I think the 2 hottest seats going into next year, I guess 3 if Sam Pittman comes back, is Brent Venables, Hugh Freeze, Sam Pittman. And then the last game we'll preview, the big one, Alabama at LSU. Alabama -2.5. Point total 48.5. Alabama, LSU, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ABC. Setting the tone for you. This is a playoff game, folks. It's a playoff game. Elimination game, whatever you want to call it. I've seen some people be like, I don't know if it's an elimination game. Unless there's pure chaos, a 9-3 team ain't getting in. Night game in Tiger Stadium. People forget this at times, though. Alabama has only lost in Baton Rouge 5 times since 1970, and it's a place they play there every other year. And when I was looking it up, I think they played maybe New Orleans 1 year factor in since 1970. But since 1970, Alabama's only lost in Baton Rouge 5 times. Now, that's an irrelevant stat. It has nothing to do with the 2024 LSU team or the 2024 Alabama team. Speaking of, Josie, they're putting a live tiger in the field for this one. They're bringing that tradition back. It's awesome. But this game's a complete coin flip to me. I've gone back and forth for 2 weeks. I had one team picked for about 13 days, and 2 days before I had to give a prediction, I flipped when I dug a little bit more. But this game's a complete coin flip. You could convince me a ton of things are going to happen. And if anyone's telling you they know exactly what's going to happen, they're lying. I think this game's going to come down to 2 to 3 plays, just like it did 2 years ago when LSU walked off Alabama. Give Kalen DeBoer his flowers. He's been big in big-time games in his career, going back to beating Oregon multiple times at Washington, beating Sark and Texas twice the last 2 years. But the question, can Alabama take this show on the road and play well in this environment? This isn't just a Kalen DeBoer thing. This has been going on since 2021. Alabama on the road has not been playing well. For the first year or two of it, I didn't believe it. But it's a thing now. They haven't been playing well. Highly penalized team. 2022 in Knoxville, they had 17 penalties. A couple of weeks ago in Knoxville, they had, 15? This screams a game they go get a bunch of pre-snap penalties and stuff like that. Kalen DeBoer said in his coach's talk the other day, though, he thinks maybe some of the offensive players are probably deaf after the last 2 weeks of prepping for the crowd noise. So we'll see how that goes. Brian Kelly at home during his time at LSU has not lost a game at night, something to keep an eye on. And there's a clear path for both teams to get a victory. But what's going to happen? Straight up question. What Jalen Milroe do we get, guys? Y'all remember him out of the bye week last year heading into this game, right, in Tuscaloosa? Just looked like a totally different athlete. It's like he needed the bye week. And I said going in, there wasn't a team and player that needed a bye week more than Alabama and Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe needed a bye week more than any player in the country. But let's be honest, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If Alabama were to leave Baton Rouge with a win, Jalen Milroe has to play well for Alabama on Saturday night. Garrett Nussmeier, I feel like I know what I'm going to get with him. Some big-time throws, some NFL throws. He's probably going to throw a pick or two. And here's something for Kane Womack, Alabama's defensive coordinator. Garrett Nussmeier is not throwing an interception versus man coverage this year. All 9 of his interceptions came against zone. So I think you got to sit in zone with your young DBs against 3 really good receivers. I know C.J. Daniels is banged up a little bit, but he's good. Tyron Lacey's good. Aaron Anderson, the former Alabama receiver who'd be playing for them this year, is good too. LSU's got a major mismatch advantage on the outside against the young Alabama secondary. I think you got to play zone, mix up some simulated pressures from that standpoint. And I went back and look. I always like to look if these coordinators faced off, as Kane Womack's his swarm defense faced off against Joe Sloan or Cortez Hankton, or is Blake Baker's defense played? Remember, he comes from the Manny Diaz tree, Blake Baker. Have they faced a Kalen DeBoer, Nick Sheridan? And no, there's not really anything to go off of that. So I wanted to think about that. But for both these offenses, I'm establishing the run game, but because I don't think specifically for Alabama, I don't think LSU's defensive front's really been that tested. If you go look at their schedule, I think Alabama's the best offensive line that LSU's faced. And that's not me saying Alabama is the Great Wall of China here. I don't think there's a great offensive line in college football right now. I posted on Twitter the other day, who would win the Joe Moore Award right now? I didn't get a response from Cole Kubick, but who would win it? Probably Oregon right now. Again, offensive line plays down. Cole Kubick himself says it. So I'm not trying to say that, but I think it is the best offensive line they face. I mean, it's not South Carolina. It's not Ole Miss. It's not USC. It's not Texas A&M. Alabama, especially on the interior with Tyler Booker, Parker Brailsford, and Jaden Roberts, even though he's banged up a little bit. It's the best interior they've had. It'll be the first real challenge they've had since Jacoby and Guillory went out. But on the flip side, will LSU commit to the run game? Because LSU hasn't really tried to run the football either, just like Alabama. It's like both these teams really haven't attempted to do it. Who will be committed to it? Like if LSU comes out first drive and scores on Alabama, Alabama doesn't need to go out and just sling the rock around for 3 straight plays. You got to go play your game, play within your game, run the football. I think LSU potentially could. This isn't a Nick Saban run defense. Alabama hasn't been terrible. They gave up some explosives in the run game against Tennessee, but for the most part, they kind of held them in check. It's not like you're just running to a brick wall, but they're only – I mean, you could get 2 to 4 yards of carry against Alabama. You just got to be patient to pick up that first down. And that's where a lot of teams struggle, play callers, quarterbacks in college football now. Just take what's in front of you. Like I mentioned, there's nothing wrong with 4 yards in 2nd and 6, folks. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think this game just comes down to 2 things. Who runs the football better, who stays committed to it, and what does Jalen Milroe do? I feel like I kind of know what I'm getting with Garrett Nussmeier, like I mentioned. 3 to 4 touchdowns, 3 to 4 touchdowns, a pick or 2. But if I'm Alabama, I think the biggest mismatch in this game is probably LSU's receivers and Garrett Nussmeier. Again, because you can't get to him. You can't sack him because Will Campbell, Emory Jones are really good on the edge and pass pro. And Garrett Nussmeier maneuvers in the pocket really well. He doesn't really get sacked at all. I think 1 all year off the top of my head. So if I'm Alabama, I'm going to try to run the football, keep their offense off the field. The less plays they run against my young secondary, the better. So why don't we go try to run the football with Jalen Milroe? Hopefully he looks as healthy if you're Alabama. Hopefully he looks as healthy as he did off the bye week last year. And he even looked healthy off the bye week against Georgia a month and a half ago. Remember, he just looked more explosive. Do you see that? Use him in the run game. You have to stay committed. But I think some way, somehow, at night in Baton Rouge at Tiger Stadium, I just think Alabama gets it done. You can make a case for me either way, and I couldn't argue with you. I just think Jalen Milroe somehow gets it done. I think the run game is the difference. I think they're going to be able to run on LSU this week. And I'm not saying LSU won't be able to run against Alabama, especially on the edges, because I don't think Alabama has the speed defensively they've had. They take bad angles in the secondary in the run game. But I think Alabama gets it done. Some way, somehow, they advance. LSU's probably eliminated from the playoffs. Bama moves on to fight another day. LSU loses for the first time in Baton Rouge at night since 2021 against Bo Nix, Brian Harsin, and Auburn in Ed Orgeron's last year. I think that just ends up being what it is, guys. I think Alabama wins this one 34-28. Some way, somehow, you can make a lot of different cases for me there. You can make a lot of different cases for me, and I think you're right. A path to victory, but I think it just comes down to who's committed to the run game, because I think both teams can be had there, and Jalen Milroe. That's what it is. And then last segment here, guys, money-making weekend. Again, we went down a little bit last week. We're sitting at 45%. Now we're back at 42%. But I got 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 good bets for you. I feel really confident about this one, actually, guys. Feel really good. Let's start off. I told you in the preview, Texas, Florida, I'm laying the points. 21.5. I know it's a lot. I even said it was a lot in the preview, but I'm laying the points, folks. Texas off a bye week. They got to get the offensive line back in check. Can't be giving up pressure like they did against Texas. And even Vanderbilt had 4 sacks against Vanderbilt. I just think Texas plays well. Again, it could be maybe 17-3, 14-3 at the half, 17-7, something like that. But with Florida's backup quarterback, folks, with Aiden Warner, I don't see it. I don't see it. And I hate being like that. I just don't see it them generating a lot of points, because I do think this Texas defense and secondary is improved. So I'm laying the points, 21.5. Give me the horns. Ole Miss, Georgia, first half point total under 27.5. Georgia always starts off slow offensively. I think Ole Miss could start slow. But again, I could see Ole Miss come out and score initially right off the bat. That's what they do under Lane Kiffin. Phenomenal scripter, just like Gus Malzahn and Kalen DeBoer as well, and Sark. But Georgia always comes out slow. I think it's just I think both defenses are going to get after each other early. Give me the first half under 27.5. And I'm going to lay the 2.5 for Georgia. I mentioned I think Georgia wins this game, but I'm going to lay the 2.5 there. So 2 bets with that Ole Miss Georgia game. We're first half under 27.5. And I'm laying the 2.5 for Georgia. I'm going to Alabama first quarter pick 'em. It's a pick 'em. Whoever's up at the end of the first. I think Alabama starts off a little better this game than they did against Tennessee. They're not going to go backwards. I like Alabama coming out of the gate off the bye week looking pretty good. I like Kalen DeBoer in big games. I like them off the bye week. They came out firing their last bye week against Georgia. I think they may be cooking a little bit. I like Alabama to lead at the end of the first. So I'm going to take Alabama first quarter pick 'em. Bama leading at the end of the first. I'm going to take UCF -3 at Arizona State. Gus Malzahn's former OC at Auburn, Kenny Dillingham. So I'm going to take UCF here for whatever reason. Whenever you're doubting the Knights, they kind of step up. I mean, everybody was picking them against BYU a couple weeks ago. I didn't understand that, but I didn't pick them there. But I don't know. This is a game they kind of win, right? I don't know. It's just a field pick for UCF here. My guy Dylan. What's it? I'm looking it up. Dylan Raiola started for him. I signed him when I was at UCF. No, not Dylan Raiola. Dylan Rizek. That's our guy they signed who's getting the start for Tim Harris, the OC at UCF. So I'm going to take UCF -3 in that one. Next one, I'm going to take Oregon first half -14.5 against Maryland. Oregon's been coming out and just throwing haymakers at teams initially in the first half. I think they continue to do it. What an awesome speech the other day by Dan Lanning. He said, "Are you not entertained?" Remember the Gladiator line, the Russell Crowe movie? The young generation won't remember it, but the older generation, we remember that. Millennials and Gen X and Boomers, we all remember that one. But I'm going to take Oregon first half -14.5. They've just been doing damage on people in the first half. I think it continues against Maryland. Miami, Georgia Tech under 64. I don't think it's going to go over here, folks. I think it's an under ACC game, just another field pick. I'm going to go with a couple point totals here. I'm going to take that one. Army, North Texas under 64.5. That's really high. That's really high. I don't think that gets enough possessions. Maybe close. I don't see it. That's a lot. For Army, who's going to run the football, same with North Texas, 64.5. I'll take that under. Then Vandy team total. Get South Carolina. Remember, Vanderbilt's team total under 20.5. I like that one, too, against a really good South Carolina defense. And then Tennessee -6.5 in the first quarter against Mississippi State at home. Coming out of the gate is what I'm hoping they're up a touchdown or more, folks. I think they're going to come out of the gate hot. They could probably, again, like I said, they could run to victory. They could run to this bet win for me. So let's recap it here. Laying the 21.5 for Texas against Florida. Give me Texas -21.5. 2 bets in this Ole Miss Georgia game. Ole Miss Georgia first half under 27.5. Laying the 2.5 Georgia straight up to get the win. I think Alabama's going to lead in the first quarter in Baton Rouge on Saturday night. Give me Alabama first quarter pick 'em. UCF -3. They take the show on the road to Tempe. They need this game to kind of get to bowl eligibility. Gus, I could see them winning this game. Wouldn't shot me money line, but I'm going to get -3 against his former OC and Kenny Dillingham back when they worked together at Auburn. Oregon first half -14.5 against Maryland. Been doing what they want to teams not named Ohio State in the first half and since that game. Miami, Georgia Tech under 64. Army, North Texas under 64.5. Vandy Team total under 20.5 against a good South Carolina defense. And Tennessee coming out of the gates hot, hopefully for our bets, -6.5 first quarter against Mississippi State. But guys, we're just 10 minutes over. We're at 70 minutes tonight. I appreciate you joining us on this episode of Dave Talks Ball. Remember, guys, this episode is brought to you by Roback. Go to roback.com and use code SECU for 20% off your first purchase. Great episode, guys. Pete Nakos from On3 joined us. We talked a little Billy Napier being back. We talked about Coaching Carousel, who Oklahoma could hire as their OC. Transfer portal is going to be wild. We hear that all the time. Wait to see. But again, Pete brought some great things. Talked a little SEC basketball. We have some phenomenal matchups on Saturday. Auburn, Houston in Houston. Baylor, Arkansas in Dallas. I mentioned I did my own segment on Billy Napier being back. I don't hate it. I think it's kind of a chess, not checkers move, not an emotional decision. Again, new ecosystem, the revenue sharing coming, the $20 million revenue sharing. If you believe in Billy Napier, you don't have any off the field stuff. You got the highest rated quarterback you've ever signed on campus already. He's played well when he hadn't been hurt in DJ Lagway. Maybe he comes back a little bit. I don't know. I think it's kind of a good mature financial move by Scott Strickland, the administration. Like, hey, let's give him, why everybody else is being impatient with coaches, looking at you, Auburn. Let's just give him one more year. Let's get the lay of the land of college football. And let's potentially, if Billy Napier doesn't work out, maybe he ends up being worked out. Maybe it works out for him. But if it doesn't, we know a little bit of what the future of the sport looks. We can bring our new coach in. That's probably the most important Florida football hire in my lifetime, at least in this century, the 21st century. Well, let's set him up for success. So I really don't hate the move. I know a lot of people do. And I think there's arguments to be made for him not to come back because the record, again, is not good for Billy Napier as the head man at Florida. I mean, it's just not. Let's call a spade there, guys. 15-18 in total. We previewed the games. Again, I got Texas beating Florida. I got Georgia winning in Oxford. I got South Carolina beating Vanderbilt. Tennessee handling Mississippi State. Oklahoma getting a big win to get to bowl eligibility with with Brady Cook being out. And some way, somehow, think Alabama, who commits to the run game, Jalen Milroe. Remember, you heard that here first, guys, and gave you 10 phenomenal bets, guys. Remember, the goal still, betting-wise, 55%. But, guys, I appreciate you joining us on this episode of Dave Talks Ball. I am Dave. I'm Dave Shoemate, longtime college football personnel staffer in the SEC and around college football. Hope you have a phenomenal weekend, guys. Join me and Cole Thompson and myself, all the reactions for Saturday's games. Can't wait to bring it to you guys. Until next time, you have a phenomenal weekend.